go. Super Bowl 57, Kansas City, Philadelphia. We're going to kind of go through everybody here, but let's start with, when you're building your lineups in the captain spot, who do you think essentially is going to have the best game here, fantasy-wise, in this one?
Yeah, so, last week I got a little bit sneaky by taking Mahomes for the AFC Championship, and sure enough, he was only rostered on about 8% of teams in the captain slot in the main GPP, but he looked great. He should be closer to 100%. So his rostership will probably be back to normal levels. So I'm going the route you've been going the past couple weeks, and that's just Jalen Hurts in the captain slot. I think, he hasn't needed to do much in the first two playoff games. He's been held below 160 passing yards and 40 rushing yards in both games. His shoulder, he said it's still not 100%, but I think the extra week of rest should help. So, for the Super Bowl, he's going to get max usage here in the passing game, in the running game. So the chances of him just, handing the ball off to Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott for the entire fourth quarter is much lower here. I think this is going to be a close game, possibly even a trailing game script. So, he's just going to have max usage. And as always, his rushing touchdown upside is what makes him such a great captain play. Every time he rushes for a touchdown, that takes away from everybody else. Although I will say, I think the pivot I would make would be to just use AJ Brown in the captain slot. The Chiefs have played man coverage at a top 10 rate. And Brown has torched man coverage with a 3.25 yards per route run rate on the seasons. The Chiefs do mix it up with their coverage, so there's no guarantee they're going to play more man coverage here. So this is a spot where Brown should thrive. The Chiefs do rank 31st in DVOA against number one wide receivers. And last week the hip injury didn't seem to slow AJ Brown at all. So he should be 100% for the Super Bowl. And he was clearly frustrated in the divisional round. So I think they made it a point, the squeaky wheel treatment last game, and they were just targeting him early and often, even underneath. So his 31% target per route run rate was the fourth time this season he's seen over a 30% target per route run rate. So I think they're clearly going to get him the ball early and often here. So he's the kind of guy with the massive upside I like in the captain slot from a wide receiver. So for me, it's Hurts and Brown all the way here.
Yeah, I like Hurts as well because Mahomes, we still don't know where he's going to be in terms of the rushing. And so I like Hurts because, when you put him in a captain spot, he could throw for touchdowns and you could kind of stack guys in reverse, but he's also a really good bet to get a rushing score. He's gotten one in 11 of 17 games this year. That's 65%. And he's gotten 3 or more total touchdowns, rushing and passing, just under 50% of the time. So high floor, high ceiling. I'm projecting him over 2 points higher than Mahomes this week. He's only $200 more on DK. I guess would be 300 in the captain spot, and about 3.5 points more than Travis Kelce. And he's only 600 more than Kelce on DK. So I think Hurts is the best value here. And you mentioned Kansas City. They play cover one. That's why they play man at one of the higher rates, because they play cover one the most. And Hurts averages 9.2 yards an attempt against cover one. And then their second most played coverage is cover two, and he averages 9.3 yards an attempt against cover two. So they could, like you said, they could switch it up. But about 40% of their coverages are cover one and cover two, if you go by their season numbers. And Hurts is killing against both of those. So maybe they play more cover three. I think that's his kind of his worst coverage. But Spagnuolo always switches it up. But I just thought I'd point that out. And I like Kelce this week as well, just because if I'm going with Hurts, I'm probably going to have a little bit less Mahomes in the captain spot. So if I want a Chiefs player, I'm still going with Kelce. His postseason numbers throughout his career are just absurd. He's had a touchdown in each of his past 5 postseason games. He's had a touchdown in 11 of his past 14 postseason games. That even predates Mahomes by a game. So I think that was Alex Smith for the 14th one, but 10 of 13 with Mahomes. He scored at least 1 touchdown. He has 100 yards and or a touchdown in 68% of his games this year, and 100 yards and or a touchdown in 14 of 17 career postseason games. 82%. He's getting either 100, a touch, or both. So, I mean, this guy just shows up, and It's the narrative. It's only one Kelsey can get in the end zone. So you know which one that is, and he's gonna want to kind of show out on his bro. So I'll follow the narrative there. I think Kelsey, even if he doesn't put up massive yardage, the Eagles defense is very good against the pass. But even if he doesn't put up massive yardage, I think he finds his way to the end zone. And like you mentioned, there could be negative game script. This is the second lowest spread in a game that Jalen Hurts has started this year. So they're still a favorite, but and now it's down. Well, it's actually down to 1.5 at some spots. So I believe that would be the lowest.
If it has to be.
Yeah. Because they had a game where they were a dog, but that was Minshew against Dallas.
Yeah.
They've always been favored all year.
Yeah. They lost both Minshew games. Their only loss with Hurts was against Commanders at home. They were clearly favorites. Yeah. They were clearly favorites for that. So yeah, it's definitely the lowest spread for the Eagles this season.
All right, let's talk some mid-range guys. We'll get to the dart throws in a bit, but who are you going to start with here?
So let's just I'm going to start off with Juju Smith-Schuster, and really I'm just opening up about this Chiefs wide receiver mess because they're all hurt except for MVS. So with Juju, we're going to have to monitor his knee injury. He had to leave the game early last week, but it was the fourth straight game he's seen a target per route run rate below 10%. So I have to imagine his roster ship's going to be, the lowest point it's been all season. But he's the most likely Chief to avoid, Darius Slay and James Bradbury in coverage. So he does have the better matchup. But again, it comes down to his health. So this is a wait and see, and just it's impossible right now to project the Chiefs wide receivers because again, they're all injured. So how are you handling this situation right now? Are you just projecting them all being 100%, or how are you going about this?
So I actually am not. I am kind of looking at each individual injury and kind of adjusting from there. So Juju had a knee injury. That's not good. So,
no.
So typically wide receivers that play through a knee injury are going to see like a 15 to 20% decrease in their fantasy production. So until we see him, off the injury report or practicing in full, I'm docking him a significant amount, about 20% of his normal production in about 10% usage and then another 10% in terms of his actual production. So it adds up to about 20%. For Juju, I only have him projected for 3 catches right now, which is more than he's been doing the last 5 games. But
right.
No, I mean, when you watch Juju, I feel like he hasn't really been quite right since he came back from that concussion. Like I know he's had a couple of games where he hit double-digit targets and he had like a 74-yard game and an 88-yard game. But besides that, he came back from that concussion in week 12, 3 for 38, 3 for 35. There's a 3 for, and then the last 5, 3 for 27, 2 for 21, 2 for 35, 2 for 29, 1 for 7. So he had those 2 big games, the 9 for 74 and the 10 for 88. That was, in his 3rd and 4th game back. And then he really hasn't done anything. So I don't know.
He's been awful.
Yeah. So, do you have any just insight? Like, what do you think is going on with him? Do you think it's, physically related? Do you think it's just variance? Because even that knee injury in the Bengal game, I didn't really see him get hurt. Like he was on, I rewatched it, and he was on the field. I believe it was for that MVS conversion or something like that, I think. And then the play that Hardman got hurt. And then it was like, you never really saw Juju get hit or like twist anything. And then next thing you know, they're like, he's just on the sideline with a knee injury. So like, I don't know. What are you seeing out of Juju the second half of the year?
Yeah, no, I can't figure out either. Again, his target per route rate numbers have been just absolutely awful. So there's definitely something there. Maybe he's not getting separation or whatnot. Could be a physical issue. It's not like it's an age thing. He's still just like 25 years old. He's always younger than you think because he's been around for so long, but he started so early. But looking at his separation numbers, it hasn't been too bad. I don't know.
But that's at the target point. So it could just be that when he's
not getting, exactly.
Yeah,
he's only getting targeted when he's wide open.
Right.
Is what it comes down to. And
that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
like just kind of watching it. I don't go back and watch every single play on all 22, but I watch every game and see every play. And I mean, I don't remember him ever. I don't remember saying, "Oh my God, like Juju's wide open and they missed him" or something like that. It's usually just he's kind of just there. So it's tough.
The slump sort of started when Tony started getting more playing time, and Tony gets targeted at such a high rate. That could have something to do with it. There's just a lot of factors, probably just all the factors colliding at once. But again, like if Juju's active and it's Tony, Watson, and Hardman are out, that's probably going to help his case. So there's just a lot of moving parts here. So it's something that we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think Watson should be fine. He had an illness, so that
exactly.
last 2 weeks. So I think Watson will be good to go. Tony was concerning because it was like a non-contact ankle injury, and Hardman it's concerning because he,
re-aggravated.
He's been struggling with this pelvis injury all year. So I checked out, how many snaps and routes they were playing before they went down. So Juju was in on 76% of the routes before he went down. So that's kind of pretty much around his season average. Tony, he barely, got through. I think it was the first quarter, but he was actually in on 43%, which would have been tied a season high.
Yeah.
And then Hardman was 36% before he went down, which is a pretty big decrease. He usually at 55% for the year. So, that's kind of what you would expect if they're healthy, I think. And Watson would probably, bump down probably in the low 20s. But I think MVS, he played the most in the slot last game. So maybe he can avoid Slay and Bradbury. I also saw them use MVS out of the backfield on a couple of plays. So they did start to get a little bit creative with him. So, I am intrigued, but it really depends on what's going to happen with, with Juju, obviously, because Juju, he would still kind of project as that number one, or at least, co-number one with MVS, and MVS will probably get more rostership after the big game. So,
and even with all those injuries, Sky Moore failed to clear 15 yards.
Oh man. Yeah. I haven't projected for one catch right now. So yeah, I'm not expecting too much from Sky Moore in this spot. Like I think it would be, Juju. I think MVS would lead the team in routes, followed by Juju.
Yeah.
Tony, if everyone was healthy, I think they would like Tony to be third, Hardman fourth, and then Moore and Watts. Like Watson usually plays when they go one wide and when they have like two or three tight ends on the field. That's usually his kind of the formations that he plays, and then Moore would just be the backup to everybody essentially.
Yeah, no, I would love to see Tony healthy for the game, but he's the one guy that just anytime he gets hurt, it always turns into a multi-week thing. So I hope he's okay, but he's the one that I'm worried the most about missing. Just based on his past, and you said it was like a non-contact ankle injury. Again, we have like very limited info on these, so this will be a ever-changing projection for both of us.
Yeah. Who else do you like in the mid-range?
Yeah, so for the Eagles side, I do like Dallas Goedert. He's been fairly quiet after returning from his 5-game absence late in the season, but he's now seen 20% or greater target per route run rate in both playoff games. And he gets high percentage throws underneath. So he has 5 catches in both games. But he has massive upside if the Eagles finally have a pass-heavy game script where, they might be trailing. So I think he has 7 to 8 catch sort of upside here. So I do like him in this spot. His rostership might be a little bit lower than it should be. And then I like both pass catching backs for both teams. Again, this is if you're building a trailing game script for either team. I wouldn't use them both in the same lineup necessarily. So Jerick McKinnon, I think it's a good time to buy low on him. He's posted back-to-back duds in the playoffs so far. Pacheco, strangely enough, had a higher routes run rate.
Yes,
52%. I want to get your thoughts
when
on
I bet
that.
When I bet the under on his receptions, that's what he goes and does.
So I'm trying to figure that out. It could revert back this week. I don't know if it had to do with the Chiefs were in control for most of the game, so the Chiefs had more 2 to 3 tight end sets.
Absolutely,
and they
were not in control for most of the game. First of all, they were not.
Well,
that game was close the whole game. Well, they were not in control at any point.
They were. I'm just saying that Pacheco's in there on early downs, right? So they had more 2 to 3 tight end sets because of all the wide receiver injuries, and they were way more pass heavy than usual in the 3 tight end sets. So I think that could have to do with it. But Pacheco, he looked great. I don't know why they haven't used him more as a pass catcher, but either way, the facts are undeniable. Pacheco outran McKinnon, but again, that could change here. So I think in a potential trailing game script, I think McKinnon will get more involved, and his rostership will be lower. I think he was one of the top captain, his rostership in the AFC Championship game was probably too high. So I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by that dud. So again, I think he's sneaky. If you want to build a Chiefs trailing game script type of lineup, McKinnon's the way to go there. And then Kenny Gainwell, he's not under the radar anymore. He has the second highest rushing yards per game in the playoffs, even more than Christian McCaffrey. And, he's benefited a ton from just getting a garbage time at the end of these blowouts. And he has looked like the best back in the backfield. But in a potential pass-heavy trailing game script, he could see a lot more work in the passing game. So this is a spot where we could see him top 50% routes run rate in the passing game. So I do like his upside in almost any game script right now. And I think his rostership will be a little bit higher than I like it to be. But again, if I'm building a Eagles trailing game script lineup, he's definitely going to be in there.
Yeah, the Chiefs, they tightened up against running backs last week against Cincinnati. I think it was 19 yards on 7 targets. But for the year, they've been one of the bottom 5 teams in terms of DVOA against running backs, in terms of schedule adjusted targets per game allowed to running backs, and schedule adjusted yards per game allowed to running backs in the pass game. So the season long numbers tell you that Gainwell should have some success. And he has been averaging, I believe it's about 2 receptions per game over his last half dozen. So I've actually bumped up my reception projection for him from his usual 1.5 to about 1.9. So I'm expecting him to catch a couple passes here, but it'll be interesting to see how much they use him coming off that, because I agree. I think he did look great out there, but at the same time, we've seen the Eagles just in these super positive game scripts where they could just essentially put Sanders on ice. I think they put him on ice in the third quarter.
Late in the third, he was done. Done. And I think, to be fair, some of those targets to the Bengals backs, mainly Samaje Perine last week, was just Burrow freaking out because he was under pressure immediately. One of them was an intentional grounding. Another, he threw it to Perine. Perine didn't even know the ball was coming his way. So I don't think they were very good targets because, Burrow is under constant pressure. But yeah, so I think with the Eagles, a better offensive line, they will take advantage of the Chiefs defense that has struggled against pass catching backs this year.
Yeah. I like, you already mentioned him, but AJ Brown, I think he's the guy I'm going with as that top Eagles pass catcher here. As you mentioned, Kansas City 31st in DVOA against number 1 receivers, and they've allowed the second most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers in a regular season with 20. And also, they were showing some cracks downfield targets last week. On targets 20 yards or more down the field, Kansas City allowed 3 of 6 for 83 yards and a touchdown. So that's certainly something I think Brown can exploit. He finished 6th during the regular season in deep targets with 29. And then I also like both of the starting 2 down, early down backs in this game. I like Miles Sanders because the Kansas City defense, they have pretty drastic splits when they play good teams versus when they play bad teams. So when they played playoff teams, they've allowed 7 running back touchdowns in 9 games. And then when they played non-playoff teams, that goes down to 50%. So about 75% of the time, over 70% of the time, they're allowing a touchdown to a running back against the playoff team. And in both of the last 2 games, they allowed one to a running back. One of them was Perine, but I think Sanders is still the most likely to get those touches by the goal line if it's as long as the game is close. And then looking at my projected touchdown odds for this game, Miles Sanders, I remember last year, I know we were banging his unders, and I think he finished with 0 rushing touchdowns. This year, it's kind of a different story. He's been, and the whole team, I mean, Jalen Hurts included, just racking up the scores on the ground. But So I'm looking at my projections, and I have Sanders as the second highest skill player in terms of projected touchdown odds at 40%. So that trails only Travis Kelce for me by about about 5%. It trails Travis Kelce. So I'm pretty high on Sanders here getting into the end zone. And when I kind of, calculate the, take the touchdown odds and divide it by the salary to kind of get my little touchdown values, Sanders is pretty much right there at the top of the list. Gainwell also scores pretty high in that, so I like that call as well. I'm just worried that like it might flip back to Sanders if he gets like more playing time this week, because they took him out in the third last game and the fourth the game before, so that's where Gainwell really kind of racked up a ton of usage. But in games that like during the regular season, it was more like Sanders would get 70% of the backfield carries, Gainwell would get 15 to 20%, and that really has kind of flip-flop to where Gainwell's getting almost 30, 40, sometimes half. So I do like kind of going back to Sanders here. I do think he has a really good shot of getting in the end zone, and I think he has a good shot of seeing potentially his most carries of the postseason if the game is close. And I know he had 17 against the Giants, but he's been a guy when the game is close, he will get 75, 80% of the backfield carries, and they have been keeping him on ice. There's no reason to keep him on ice now.
Exactly.
So I do think people need to keep that in mind. I know we have to kind of pay attention to the last couple of games a lot when we project running backs, but I do think he's still around about just under 70% of the backfield design carries for the season. I think you could see him go back to that this week against the Chiefs. And then Pacheco, I do like Pacheco too. I know like he's not obviously is going to be as under the radar as McKinnon, but Philadelphia, just from a game planning perspective, Philadelphia is still a run funnel defense. They're first in pass DVOA, 19th against the run, and they haven't allowed many running back runs in the playoffs because they've been up so much, but they've allowed 29, and those 29 carries have gone for 178 yards and a touchdown and 2 touchdowns. So that's over 6 yards per carry to running backs in the postseason. So that defense started trending up down the stretch once they got Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph, but the efficiency really hasn't been there for that defense in the postseason, and even going back to the last couple games of the regular season as well. A running back has scored in 61% of games against Philly, 4 of the last 6, and Pacheco's got 73% of the backfield carries since week 11, and that's important because I don't think you're going to see Mahomes running around. Is like, I know he scrambles sometimes and usually scrambles more in the postseason, but still think he's probably going to be a little bit more cautious in terms of scrambling around. So it could be all running backs or maybe like a gadget player too when they get down in close. So I have Pacheco with about a 34% chance for a touchdown, which is 4th among skill players for me. So another guy that, I feel like you got to kind of nail the touchdowns for these kind of slates. So another guy, I think he's only got 5, I believe, on the year, but I think he's in a good spot to get one here against Philly.
Yeah, I like it. And what do you think in terms of running back stacks? Like if you're going to take 2 running backs, 1 from each team, I think the logical, point of view is Miles Sanders, stack him with McKinnon with a, Eagles leading game script, or Kenny Gainwell and Pacheco for a Chiefs leading game script, or it's just going to be a close game and you just go Sanders, Pacheco. What are your thoughts on like how you're going to handle those correlations?
Yeah, I think if you're putting Sanders in a lineup, I don't think it matters as much because we've seen what happens with Sanders, right? If the Eagles are doing well, Sanders is getting into the end zone early in the game, and then they take him. So he's going to get his either way. If it's a close game, he's going to get, 15, 16, 17, 18 carries because it's close. So I think Sanders is a little more kind of game script agnostic in terms of who you could stack him with. Like, I think it makes sense to stack him with McKinnon, as you said, or Pacheco. Whereas if you're going with Gainwell, I think that's where I would go a little more strongly toward Pacheco, because I think, toward Pacheco, because I think that in that situation, you're kind of playing for, okay, Eagles negative game script. Although, I mean, there is the chance the Eagles just blow out the Chiefs, right? I mean, that's part of the question.
Exactly.
So then you could still see kind of the same thing. So, but I do think what you said at first is probably the optimal way to go. Sanders, McKinnon, Gainwell, Pacheco. But I'm not overly concerned with any pairing just because the Eagles run so damn much, right? It's just kind of.
But they've never been really in a trailing game script.
Yeah,
so.
they may not. I got the Mahomes jersey on, but that doesn't mean I'm like. I just thought it was a cool jersey to wear. But I think your point is taken. I think that's how. That would be my starting point, is to pair the opposites with each other.
Yeah.
But I think the Eagles are just, it's just really tough to say, okay, like fade this guy just because you have the other guy, because everyone's just been getting so many carries because they're just running the hell out of the ball.
Yeah.
But all right, but we're down to dart throws now. Who do you like?
So one last time, right, for the Eagles. So when it comes to the Eagles, there's really two dart throws that you can consider. Boston Scott is a dart throw if you think they're going to blow a team out. Quez Watkins is a dart throw if you think they will actually be in a close game or, God forbid, a trailing game script. So now through the first two rounds of the playoffs, they've been in two blowouts. So Quez has 0 catches. You've cashed both of your unders on him. Nicely done. That is his floor is 0 catches. We're well aware of that. However, this is a game where, they might be in a pass-heavy game script. So I think the chances of Quez not only catching a pass, but catching a deep ball, maybe a touchdown, go up here. And it was nice to see, we were kind of wondering why Zach Pascal led in routes run in the divisional round, but it bounced back up to the more normal levels. So Quez, had a 52% routes run rate last week. They didn't really have to throw him the ball much. So, he had the 0 catches, but this is a game where they could take a shot or two to Quez downfield. So he's back in play as a dart throw.
I got some great numbers on Quez. I knew we were going to go there. So, first of all, Kansas City defense, 10th in EPA and 6th in success rate against passes from 1-2 personnel, but 16th in EPA and 20th in success rate against passes in 1-1 personnel. So I think there is incentive for the Eagles to go back to throwing out of more 1-1 personnel, and that would be obviously good for Watkins. Just under a quarter of his targets have been 20 or more yards downfield this year. And you mentioned the game scripts. When they're leading or tied, he's averaging just 8.3 yards a catch, 5 yards a target. When they're trailing, he averages over 17 yards a catch and just under 12 yards a target. So it's more than doubles in terms of the efficiency down the field when the Eagles are trailing. And his touchdown rate per target, 5% when leading, 7.7%, so close to 8% when trailing. So everything goes up, but 40 of his targets have been leading or tied and only 13 have been trailing. So he just hasn't had a much of a chance. But like you said, if the Chiefs can get an early lead, and, even if the Chiefs are just leading by, 3 or 7 for a decent amount of this game, I mean, we could see Watkins go like 3 for 96 and a touchdown or something like that. That's in his range of outcomes. So I do think that this is a Quez week. This is a week I will not be betting on his under. I think it's down to like 10.5. So the books are sharp. I give them that. They are sharp now with it, but
I would not touch that one way or the other. If anything, I'll look out for like the alt markets of like 50 or more receiving yards at like 8-1, right? He's the guy that you go for his ceiling. So I'm not going to touch even his over 10.5. Still a good chance he has 0. But going back to what you were saying, like, weeks 13 through 18, he had an ADOT of 7.2, and a lot of that coincided with Dallas Goedert being out. We've talked about that. He was kind of taking those underneath routes. Last week, his one target was 33 yards downfield, so I think he's back to being that deep shot kind of guy. So, I think just they haven't really been in a trailing spot, so it makes sense that the few times they have been, he's been seeing more targets downfield. So this would be a chance, the type of game where Quez Watkins does actually hit on a showdown slate. And then for the Chiefs, I don't want to steal your thunder too much. I think we're on the same guy. But going with Jody Fortson here,
Yes.
I think he makes a ton of sense because with the wide receiver situation being a mess, we might have one or two of these guys actually get ruled out. So the Chiefs might have to run more 2-3 tight end sets again this week. And, Fortson didn't see a target last week, but he did run a route on 18% of Mahomes dropback. So he could be overlooked here, but we're not asking him to catch 4 passes for 40 yards. Obviously, that's not in his range of outcomes. What we're looking for is a cheap touchdown near the goal line. He does have that upside. He has 4 touchdowns on his 14 career receptions in 2 seasons. So, Andy Reid likes to get pretty cute when we get in the red zone. So he has 2 weeks to scheme up a Fortson play in the end zone. So we definitely have to take some swings on Fortson in this showdown slate.
Yeah, 29% of his career catches have gone for touchdowns. And this year, he's had 13 targets all year. 38% of them have come inside the 10. Not even in the red zone, inside the 10-yard line. He's averaging 8 routes per game, 19% route participation, which is pretty solid on a pass-heavy team as a third tight end. That's 8 routes a game. That gives you could get multiple targets with 8 routes per game. If you get, the standard deviation, you likely get 1 target, but could easily get 2 if things go right. And this Eagle team, because you have Slay on the outside, because you have Bradbury on the outside, because you have all of the wide receivers, in urgent care or wherever they are, like it's, this could be a game where the Chiefs rely on not just Travis Kelce, but their heavy formations, which they've been using more of, like down the stretch in the second half. Which is, I think, hard to do with maybe Juju struggling a little bit, or maybe, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but going back to Juju, because I did have a thought on Juju, and I think what's happening with him is you look at his slot rate this year, and the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid, when they got rid of Tyreek Hill, they said, we're going to get receivers that can do everything. So all their wide receivers play out of the slot about 40% of the time. Like we saw Valdez-Scantling go over 40% last week in the slot. So this year, Juju, 42% slot rate. That is a career low. Last year, 80%. Year before, 85%. His rookie year, 59%. That's pretty much as low as he's going to go. It was like 60% slot rate before this year. And I just think, he was always a guy that he was better as a big slot. And I think now being asked to play outside more, he's just not getting open. He's just not getting open as much. And, Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback on the planet, he's going to throw to the right guy. And the right guy, more often than not this year, just hasn't been Juju, I think, because he's playing on the outside. So I think that's actually, just going back to that point that we discussed earlier. I think that's kind of what's going on with him. Now, he's had a couple of big games, when he's still been around 40% in the slot, but it's been far less consistent than at any point in his career.
I think that does make a ton of sense.
So Fortson, like him, and I'll even mention Noah Gray, because I think people will be off him because last 5 games, exactly 1 target, exactly 1 catch, right? But you look at the season-long numbers, and I think there's a lot to like here. First of all, at least 10 routes in every single game. His route participation rate has been up above 40 pretty much the entire second half of the season. And, even with Fortson back last week, 46% route participation rate for Gray. And then you look at the Eagles defense. They love to play cover 4. They play a lot of cover 3 as well. That takes care of about 45% of their total coverages. And Gray, 1.6 yards per route against cover 4. That's behind only Tony in a very small sample, and then Kelce and Juju. So Juju's actually been pretty good against some zones, which makes sense. And then against cover 3, 1.9 yards per route, again behind only Tony in a very small sample, and then Kelce, McKinnon, and Juju. And remember, Juju's probably not 100%. So you're talking about Noah Gray might be one of the better options on the field against these coverages that the Eagles tend to play. So I do think we could see another multiple target game for Noah Gray for once, for the first time in 6 games in this spot. And since the bye, even with these 5 games where he's been kind of stuck on one catch, he's still averaging 1.8 catches and 21 yards per game since the bye. So that's a pretty good average for a guy that, barely costs $1,000, 1.2K on DraftKings. So one of the cheapest players, and on a route for route basis, probably the best value. I think Fortson is the best touchdown value. Like, I have his touchdown odds around 5%, and he costs 200. So that's like a 10x if you want to do it that way. So I think he's the best, just pound for pound touchdown odds. But Noah Gray, in terms of straight up, being on the field, you're getting, double digit routes for 1.2K. It's again in a good matchup.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to beat that.
Yeah. Over these past 5 games, he has a 6% target rate on his routes per run. And then his season is 11.6.
Yep,
so he has definitely room to go up. And despite that, drop in target, production, he's caught a pass in 15 straight games, which you can't really say about guys around 1K on showdown slate. So he does have a pretty high floor, all things considered, with these lower end guys. But yeah, like when it comes to the Chiefs tight ends, Gray and Fortson are definitely in play on this slate.
Yeah, the couple of the guys I want to talk about, I don't think either of us are on them, but I just want to kind of get your thoughts on them. The first is, let's go back to Boston Scott, because when I project him out, he's coming up as a pretty bad value now that he's priced up a little bit. So like, what are you thinking in terms of, his usage? Let's say the game stays close. What are you thinking in terms of his usage? Does it go back to kind of his season-long numbers? Do you just remove all the games against the Giants when you're projecting him?
Probably.
Like, how are you kind of handling Scott? Because I think that's a guy that he's going to be tempting, to a lot of people, because you have these 3 running backs, and one is like 8K, the other is 5K, and the other is 3K, and all 3 of them have been scoring and finding the end zone. And so I think people are going to say, okay, Boston, why not just take the cheapest guy in Boston Scott? So, what are your thoughts on him? How much exposure do you kind of see yourself having for him?
I'll try to be underweight on him because, like you said, I think his rostership will be too high. I think people will just look at the touchdowns and gravitate towards him. But this is going to be a close game, and I think this leads to why you're high on Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has been capped almost all season long. He rarely plays in the fourth quarter because they're blowing teams out. I think a lot of those Scott touches that we normally see every week will go to Sanders and Gainwell. So I think I'm projecting him really low right now, and I want to be underweight on him. And if he scores a cheap touchdown, so be it. But I think the way to go here is sort of fade him and just invest in Sanders and Gainwell seeing most of the touches in this game.
Yeah, I think if you want to invest in Boston Scott, DFS, you could do it, but you have to have a certain game script. It has to be essentially Eagles blowout game script. And because if you look at Boston Scott, it's actually interesting because for the Super Bowl, I look up weird stats like this, but Boston Scott has scored the last touchdown for the Eagles in 3 of his 18 active games. So the only 2 players that have more are Hurts with 5 and Devontae Smith with 4. So Boston Scott, if they're up big, or maybe even if they're down big, he could be in there late. So that's how you kind of have to play it with kind of a more extreme game.
Extreme. I mean, running backs can get hurt. Sanders can get hurt early on, so you could play him. But I think one way to be kind of unique would be, stack Sanders and Scott. Because if there is a blowout, maybe Sanders scores a couple touchdowns early and Scott gets one late. That's kind of how every Eagles game has gone so far this year. So I don't know if that's going to be too unique. But yeah, if you're using Scott, you got to get real creative and maybe throw in a Fortson. I don't know. But I just think Scott's rostership is going to be probably too high in this game.
And the price isn't, now that the price is up, the value is not really great. Yeah, because I have about three carries in this game, which it sounds low, but that's like the median is probably still around 3. You don't expect the team to be blowing people out by 28, 30 every week. And then the other guy is Zach Pascal, because even though Quez Watkins did bounce back in terms of his route participation last week, it wasn't to his normal season level. His normal level is 62%. Last week, it was 52%. and Pascal was at 37%. The game before, he was at 38%. It's just that they used more heavy tight end personnel, and so Watkins was down at 27. But the point is, Pascal has, for now, 5 straight weeks, seen an increase in terms, 4 straight weeks, but then he's kind of stayed around 30, 37, 38 for the 2 postseason games. But he has seen a bump of about 10%. And I just wonder if you have any interest in him, being that he still is closing the gap with Watkins, and there just really is it's hard to roster any other Eagles pass catchers. Like Gainwell, I guess you could call a pass catcher, but Jack Stoll's probably only going to get 5 routes. He hasn't really been targeted in the red zone. Covey only returns kicks. Calcaterra might not even run 1 route. So right. Pascal is kind of that only other guy that if you're saying, okay, he could get a cheap touchdown, I mean, he could, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think with Quez, he can break the slate, with 1 or 2 big catches, a touchdown. I think with Pascal, you need a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And he has been in on their goal line looks. He's in their, run block. So he has been on the field, at least on those plays. And if they do something where, they fake the handoff and they throw it, he's one of 3 or 4 targets that could catch a touchdown. So he's definitely out there in those kind of like cheap touchdown plays. So yeah, I think he's definitely worth a flyer. But with him, we're not, trying to get 3 catches for 50 yards from him. It's literally just getting a cheap touchdown. And he has seen those snaps the past couple of games. So I think he's definitely worth a couple dart throws. I think Quez has more paths to get there, but there is certainly a path for Pascal.
Yeah, I have his touchdown odds around about 5.5%. So, if you kind of say, okay, if I'm making 100 lineups and there's a 5 to 6% chance Pascal scores, you probably want him in double that. You probably want him in at least 12, 10 to 15 lineups. So yeah, I think I'm gonna still have a good amount of Pascal, just because it's tough to kind of get some of these other Eagles guys in there, and Jack Stoll, he's really not popping for me, even the way Pascal is, because he just hasn't really, he'll run like a half dozen routes, and he's lucky if he gets like a 5-yard catch. So I suppose he could get a touchdown, but I have his touchdown odds like, closer to 3-4%, and kind of in that same range. So I'd rather go with the wideout. All right. Do we have luck rankings for the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Right now it's not a luck ranking. Well, I guess it is when you consider that the Chiefs are number 1 and the Eagles are number 2. So that's kind of how you get to the Super Bowl. You have to get lucky at some point. But I think, just both teams are really good. So I would just bet this game straight up. Do you have any thoughts on the spread and everything?
I'm right in line. I know that's kind of a boring thing. I thought it was kind of wild when the Chiefs were, I think the Chiefs opened like -2, 2.5. And like I by the time I went to go bet Philadelphia, that had changed. So I didn't get to take advantage of it. I was too slow, but I think now it's pretty much in line. I do see a close game. I know we haven't got that with the Eagles yet, but I think last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, it was that Tampa Bay 31-9. And I think, and that's also why I like a guy like Pacheco, because I just think they're going to take steps to make sure that they don't lose the same way, with Mahomes just kind of under duress. So I do think, to your point, we'll see a lot of Noah Gray. We'll see a lot of Fortson. I think we'll see a lot of Pacheco. And to answer your earlier question, I think Pacheco could continue to see more routes out of the backfield, because I think they're going to just want to use those heavier formations, especially with the wide receiving core in flux and not really reliable. Even if all of those guys are healthy, do you count on them to make it through the game? So right. I do think you're going to see those formations. Maybe you get Edwards-Helaire back as well. So I do think we could see a little bit more of a run heavy script for the and just heavy personnel script.
Yeah.
For the Chiefs. What about you? Any thoughts?
I had Eagles -1.5. So the market has finally settled exactly where I had it. I thought, if it got up to Chiefs +3, I was going to hammer that. Never did.
Never.
But a lot of the props I'm looking at, I haven't locked anything in yet, but a lot of the props I do like kind of correlate with the Chiefs leading game script. And I think some of that is due just the Eagles haven't been in a trailing game script. So I think there's some sneaky value in the, investing in their passing attack, investing in the Chiefs running game. So that just early observations, a lot of the props I might be on would correlate nicely with taking the Chiefs plus 1.5, but I just haven't taken a position on that quite yet.